Hello everyone, Inky Fingers here from Inky Fingers Architectural Art. Well, in today's little video I'm going to be drawing this scene. It's a scene in Robin Hood's Bay in North Yorkshire in England. Very famous little scene. But I shall be drawing this in pen. There will be no colour. And as we're drawing it in pen, we can render all of these lovely textures. Bits of stonework. We can do nice hatching, cross hatching for shading. We can make a nice high contrast looking image because of it's a white building and the sunshine is shining on with all the sort of more grey stone around them. It should look really nice. But of course, before we can draw this, we need to look at the equipment. So that's what we'll do next. This is the equipment I would use to draw something like this picture. Now we have a mix of fine liner pens. It's not a fine liner pen, but it is an ink pen. We've got a couple of brush pens. Of course, we've got the pencil and we've got some dipping pens. Now I wouldn't use all of these in one picture. So let's have a look. First we'll look at the fine liner pens. These are the most convenient to use because they're all self-contained. And the nib points, or the nib diameters we would use in something like this, is to draw the absolute outline first. The main outlines, we could use a 0.3 or a 0.1. This is a 0.5. Now it all depends on how thick you want your initial lines to be. And then once you've got your initial lines in, to do all the finer weight detail work, cross hatching, that type of thing, we can go down and you start and use either 0.05 or 0.03 fine liner pens. Now the type of line you get with fine liners is very simple, very neat, but you can't change the width. That's a 0.3. That's the line you get no matter how you do it. But it's a very good sort of strength, a very good width for doing your initial drawing of the outlines. If you want to use 0.1, again, it's a good line width for doing the outlines before you do the detail work. 0.03, this is the finest you get in this. You see, it's very good for very fine lines and also very good for doing hatching or cross hatching for the shadow work. And finally here we have the 0.05, which it just works exactly the same as the 0.03, ever so slightly wider. So it is really a toss-up between people using either a 0.03 or a 0.05. Personally, I don't think you need to use both. Now this pen, this is like an isograph, I think they're called, type pen. It you fill it up using just a cartridge, and then you just use it as you would any pen. So this is a 0.05 or 0.5, sorry. But again, it's a toss-up between using one of these and one of these. But that's what I would use to do the outlines and the detail work. The other pens we can use are brush pens. Now this is very good if you wanted to fill in larger areas such as windows, dark windows, black drain pipes. Now there's two brands here. Now again, this brand here, this is the Uni Pin. Just like all these pens, they're all Uni Pin, but this is the brush. It says it's a brush, but technically it's not a brush. It's just like a nylon, a solid small nylon tip, which is slightly flexible. And with this tip we can get some nice thick lines. We can, this is a window for example, we can fill in this window pane very simple, very quickly. Now the only problem with this, it's very inexpensive, but it's disposable. It will run out of ink eventually, and you cannot fill them up. You can't put new ink in them. I've tried, but it doesn't work. So when this gets extinguished, you've got to throw it out and it goes into landfill, which isn't a good idea. So you can get other brush pens. This is a very popular one, and I would recommend people to buy this. This is from Pentel, and I think it's called a pocket brush pen. Now this pen has a very long, very sharp and pointy brush, and the difference is that this is just the brush in this is just, as I said, just a solid piece, while the brush in this is actually a brush. Every one of these in this head is a separate nylon strand, all cut to perfection to form a proper brush. And another good thing about this, the best thing about this, is that this uses cartridges. So when the ink runs out, all you need to do is to either buy a new cartridge, or like I do, you just refill it with ink and then you're good to go. So this will never ever run out in that way. And this pen, you can get incredibly fine lines. It does take a little bit of practice to use, it is so fine, but you can get fine lines, and then you can really get down to some really deep shadow areas. That's our window. It's as quick as that. Absolutely essential for doing ink work. And finally, for pens, you could use the good old-fashioned dip-in nib pen with a bottle of India ink. Now these are the two fine ones that I use. This is I think it's called a mapping pen. It gives extremely fine lines. I'm not sure what this one's called, but it still gives quite fine lines, but a little bit thicker. And what we have here is we can still get some very fine lines, or we can get some thicker lines. So we can outline our picture with this pen, especially as you can get thicker lines by pressing down on the pen, on the nib of the pen. You can get some more artistic looking lines and an artistic looking look just with the drawing, and not a single sort of sterile look with one of these pens. And the mapping pen is extremely fine. You can get really nice fine details with this pen. And the last thing is a pencil. Personally, if I'm going to do something to draw something like this, then it is quite complicated. I always use a pencil. I draw it with the pencil first, make sure it's all correct, and then I can go over it with the pen. And I always use a 3H pencil, because a 3H pencil, partly it keeps a point sharper longer because it's a harder graphite, and it's a lighter in tone than, say, a HB. It's a lot cleaner on your paper, especially if you're using rougher paper. A softer lead or a softer graphite can smudge your paper. You can get very messy. This, you don't have. A 3H, at least, you don't have that problem. So I always use a hard pencil. Now, as we've seen, this is the picture I'm going to draw. And on the picture itself, on the drawing, I have pressed down with the pencil more harder than I would have, just so we can see it clearly on the video. But there's no real detail. It's just an outline. the tiles. All I've got here are some lines. As we can see, we've got some lines, and then all I would do very, very simply, again with the pencil, because of course if you make a mistake with the pen, then you can't rub it out. So I would just literally simplify it, but draw something like that. It's not exact, it doesn't really need to be, it's just the impression of some tiles. And I would do this just here and there, where you, especially on these buildings here that are closer to us, because that's where the detail is going to be. And you may notice that I have left out a couple of drain pipes, again just to keep things a little bit more neater. Now to get this started, I'm going to try the Uni Pin fine liner 0.3. We'll see how that actually looks on the picture. I think the line width should be quite sufficient just for the main outlines. So it's just going to be something simple. Like this. And just being very, not careful, but very mindful not to make it absolutely straight, the lines. We'll just try and make it a little bit touch wonky, a touch more human, with a human type of look. It's not being done with a set square or anything like that. And that's the picture all inked in. The pencil lines, or what you could see of them, have now been rubbed out, so it's much cleaner. And now we've got a foundation, a good foundation, because we've got some nice details in. All we need to do now is to do all the hatching, the cross hatching, the shading, which is the fun bit. So we'll start that now. So now it's all inked in. The first thing I always do is to get some darks in, because this is going to be just 100% pen and ink. We can't rely on colour, so we have to rely on tonal values. So I always like to put the darks in, the blacks in first, and in this case would be windows and any black drain pipes. So I'm going to use the the Pentel brush pen, and all I'm going to do is to carefully paint in the windows. Now I'm painting in these pure black because they are pure black in the photograph, for one. But what are windows? Well, you're looking into, well, window panes are clear, they're made out of glass, so they're transparent, and you are simply looking into a dark room. So you're seeing the darkness in the room. Now I'm being quite careful here to try and leave the window frame as white paper, and that's where this brush comes in really handy, because it has got such a fine tip. And just having that bit of black on the window, on the picture, really makes a difference already. So when we have all of these windows in and any other very dark areas, we have a good sense of tonal values, because we know everything else has got to be lighter in tone than these blacks. And I always work in blacks first, or the darkest tones first, and then go into the sort of a mid-tone, and I might do a lot of the area in a mid-tone, even if it's not such a mid-tone. And because when I do that, I'll always look at something. Okay, do I need to make something next to it? It could be darker. Do I need to make it darker, or maybe improvise and make it a little bit lighter? So you got light next to dark, dark next to light everywhere. So you get a nice tonal contrasting range over the entire picture. But this is all I'm going to do for this for these areas of the picture. So that's a window. Same thing with, for example, this drain pipe. So all I'm going to do here is this. Just put it down like so, and do this for obviously this drain pipe, any other darks, same thing. And then when that's done, I'll be back. I've now finished putting all of the windows in, the drain pipes, any other, like some railings there, and any of the tiny little things that may be actually black or the darkest tones on this picture. As the brickwork is rather dark, we can get some nice texture in, and that's what we want in this picture. Some nice texture, some nice detailing. Now I've done some brickwork here. I did show this and explain it fully, but then I realised that the record button wasn't pressed hard enough. So I'll do a little bit here and explain it again, and some on this chimney stack here. But we can see on this that it does sort of look like brickwork, especially when you zoom out. It merges into some nice old brickwork. So see this chimney stack here, we want to make it to look something like that. So all we need to do is to literally hold the pen, this pen, don't hold it there, hold it about sort of around the middle, maybe a quarter of the way from the tip, so you're not putting too much pressure, and you can just scrape the pen over the paper and get some nice really scratchy lines. So all we do, I'm hardly touching little vertical lines. I'll do another one, another brick. Now these bricks are the same tone. I'll do the bricks, always do the bricks the same tone at first, and then when they're done, I'll look at them and then go over and decide which bricks want to be darker or more burnt, more aged, or aged looking. We'll do the same with that, because that's on the opposite side of the chimney stack. But just doing vertical lines makes it look like it's brickwork. But we want some variations, like on this chimney stack here. So all we need to do is either we just go back over using the same method, doing vertical lines. For example, this brick here is quite light. We just go over it again. It darkens it up. We'll have this brick here a little bit dark. So again, I'm not putting any pressure on. We're just adding extra ink onto the paper over the ink we've put on, and it automatically makes it darker. Or what we can do is, instead of doing vertical strokes, we can add a little bit of variability, and maybe it's on this brick here, instead of doing vertical, we do horizontal or at an angle, and that makes it into cross hatching. And that, like you can see here, this is vertical, this is this is basically cross hatching, and it just gives a different angle to the shape of the brick, and it just gives a little bit of variability, so everything doesn't look like it's just up down up down up down. This brick here will have that a bit darker, so I'm just do a little bit of cross hatching on that one, maybe it's that one. So we end up having some light bricks, some mid-tone bricks, and some dark bricks, just like we've got here. We go back up here, so let's say I want this brick here, I want that darker, it's a bit more of a burnt brick, so I'll just do a bit of cross hatching there, and that makes it darker. I'll do the same with this one. This one I think I'll make darker. Maybe it's that one. We'll have that, remain that light, we'll have a darker one there, and we'll have a slightly darker brick there. With a bit of cross hatching on this one, make that darker. And my eyes, I'm just scooting my eyes constantly around this area, looking to see, well, does that need to be a bit darker? Should I leave this brick a bit lighter? Just to give an interesting pattern, so nothing is too the same. When we look at it from a little bit of a distance, they do indeed look, it looks like old brickwork, and it looks like brickwork because we've done each brick individually. Now as we're doing this sort of shape, I'll go to this wall here. So if you look at this photograph, again we can see the blocks, stone blocks. This is light, this is mid-tone, this is dark tone, exactly like we do on the brickwork. Difference is it's a little bit larger, so we could put a little bit more detail. Just examining the photograph, it's not, you can see some details. So all I'm going to do with this, I'm going to still use the 0.03 pen, and again I'm just going to really do exactly what I did for the brickwork, and every block is going to be individual. So there's a one block, there's another block, and doing this, of course, the white mortar stands out. So for example, I'll do that one. Now if you want to make these blocks even lighter, we can't leave them as white paper because they aren't white. With a pen, all you do is either really do light, barely touching the paper, or just do wider lines, and that will automatically, from a viewed distance, it'll make it look lighter. And there's one with a lot, the lines are a lot closer, but I've absolutely barely touched the surface of this paper. So it's up to the user to decide which method they like best for their picture. So then I would look at what I've done, and then, well, in this case I can look at the photograph and I can say, okay, well, maybe that block is dark, so this needs another application of pen. I would go over it again if we need it darker. Now remember, this is just up and down still, and each time we go over it makes it a bit darker. Now then I'll just stick some cross hatching, which is going to make it even darker, and it'll give that quite nice sort of texture. This one, well, we'll just do a little bit, make it sort of a mid-tone, something like that. And what we can do with this, I think I'll just make it a little bit, maybe it's ragged, put a few little dark ends there, to make it look like it could be just chipped or just a little bit broken, a few little cracks going up, and that'll just give that block a bit of extra age. Go to this one a little bit. Now we'll just do a little bit of, so I'm just tapping on the paper, doing little dots, maybe tiny little dashes, and again that's going to give the impression that there's texture. But in reality, if we zoom in, you can see up close it looks a mess. There's nothing. But when we zoom out and you sort of look at it from the distance what you should be looking, it becomes a textured block. Now here's another one. This is light. I want to keep this one light, so what I'll do, I'll just give it a bit of texture. Again, I'll just do a little bit of dots. Could be called pointillism, because they look like sandstone blocks, that type of thing maybe. So we can do a little bit, something like that, just to give the impression that it could be it's old, it's got texture, it's not new. And we'll make that a touch darker. And I'll just look around every block when I do them in. I'm just doing a few more little dots and dashes, little Morse code on this one and that one, but not much. I'll just do this on the blocks. I'll continue down and just make some light, some dark, some medium. Some will have some more texture on them, some won't. But it's just exactly the same as what I've shown you there. But I'll go down and do all of the blocks, and when that's done I'll be back. Now I've just finished putting in some texture in all of these blocks. Now you can see what I said earlier on about I always do things just in the same tone. It's sort of a mid-tone or a lightish mid-tone. So now I can look at this, what I've done, and decide which blocks to make a little bit darker and which blocks to make a lot darker. And when you've got these blocks in, these sort of light mid-tone blocks will appear much lighter because of the tonal contrasts. As we can see again on the photograph, we've got a mishmash, a jigsaw of light, medium and dark. So now all I need to do is to go look and go over and put some light or some darker tone blocks in and put a little bit of texture in here and there, and then this section will be done. So I did one block, so I thought I'd just do a few just to show you the process, because one thing we can also do, we can sort of cheat a little bit to make them look a little bit more in your face, if you want to put that term, because in the photograph we know that it's a flat wall, everything will be pretty flush. But what we can do here is we can make the block or the bricks sort of protrude out of the wall a little bit to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So what I mean by that, I've done it with this one. So I'll do this block here a little bit darker. But then at the bottom I'm just going to just dot and dab on a little darker line at the bottom, and maybe it's a bit up the side like it is here, and that's just going to make it look like the brick or the stonework is just protruding from the wall a little bit. And I finished this section of the house. Now it's nice and textured, so you can see. And the next part would be to go to the tiles. Now the tiles are pretty light, but they do have some shadow areas of where they sort of interlock together. So this is what we'll do next. First thing I'll do is the ridge tile. Now, as these tiles, you could do them both ways, but what I'm going to do, because to me these tiles are running upwards, so the pen marks are going to go upwards to give them direction. So all I'm going to do is some light areas like that, making sure I don't go over these areas where it is light. If you do go over, then don't fret about it. A little bit of white ink at the end, just to touch up, works wonders. So we can see the pen marks, how I think it just looks much more natural doing them in the direction that these tiles are going. And then for the tiles themselves, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Each individual, just like this. And I'm not going to put the darker edges on, as we can see here. That can come later on. All I want to do is to get the overall tone. As I'm doing it all the same tonal value. And I'll do the same with all the rest of this roof. I've completed this section. It's all the same tone. So now it's done. Going back to the picture, I can see that this main ridge tile is very, very much darker. So now I've got the tonal value set as sort of all the same. Now I can go back into this and just make this darker. So it's going to be dark against the lighter. I may even do a little bit of cross hatching just on this side, again just to give that little bit of extra texture, and it will darken it up a little bit. So now we've got this stands out from this much more, just like the photograph. So next thing to do is we need to define the tiles a little bit more, and we can see it's just each individual tile has got some, I suppose you call it some shadow. Even though I'm not putting shadows in at this present moment, we will put these dark areas in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply do a little bit of cross hatching on one side of these. Like so. Do the same on the next one. So we can see how it starts to build up. Now it looks like it's going, it looks like the tile is now going around like so. There's the tile. So we've just put a little bit of cross hatching there. So it looks, it's going to make it look like the tile is going, it's curved basically. So we put a little bit of dark here, a little bit of dark there. So it's dark against light, against dark, against light, against dark, against light, against dark. And that will give us the look of it being 3D. So I'll just continue that with these other tiles in this section of roof, and I'll be back. That's this part of the roof now complete. But now all I need to do is to complete these parts of the roof in exactly the same way as I've tackled this part. Right, so I've finished all the tiles. We can see they look like tiles. They've got shape because I've put the shading on one side in relation to the sun. These slates here, to draw them or to shade them in, I've gone in this direction, horizontal, and I've left some little gaps so we can see where the direction of the pen, and that just makes them a little bit lighter, so it gives them, it doesn't make them solid, it's got a little bit of texture. And what I'm doing now, I'm just putting a few little details in the background. Now these are tiles, but I'm not going to be putting tiles obviously like this because it's too far away, so I've just done a few little lines to give the impression of an angle of some detail. And then all I'm going to do is, I think this one, I'm just going to do a bit of cross hatching just to put a tone on the roof as it is in the background. I'm just going to put a shade just like this. I'll continue like this, going all the way down, and then when it's done, I'll probably do a cross hatch to make it darker and to smooth out the scratchy lines. And I'll do that all along here, probably apart from this bit because this is going to be in sunlight. So this is going to give all of this area, it'll be all in shadow. Right, I've done quite a bit to it since you've been away. I've filled in all of this area, but all of this is exactly the same technique as I did for this wall here. We haven't got anything much on the main house, but we do have some shading along here, some shadow. So we'll do that next. So all we do here is very simply, we're going to do some very light vertical lines. Again, I'm hardly touching the paper. And we do technically have shading on this some of this side of the house, but instead of doing all of this as cross hatching, what we're going to do is we're going to do a wash over it. Now this is the good thing about doing full ink work. If you've got less shadows, the sun's coming pretty much from the same angle as the picture, so we have, for example, on this side of the chimney stack we have shadow. So all the bricks are in, so all we need to do now is literally go over the whole thing like this, and maybe go on the other side, do some cross hatching the opposite way, and we can see we now have a shadow side of that chimney stack. Okay, so now we can see we've got a definite shadow on the right hand side of these chimney stacks. But what we can do to really emphasize these shadows is to put a wash over them. But this is going to be an ink wash, an Indian ink wash. You're going to use diluted ink. So when it comes to using ink to paint in shadows, I have 3 bottles. Now this is Winsor & Newton India ink. This is extremely diluted ink. a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger, so we can see, so I know I've got basically an ink wash that'll cover most things. So for example, in this ink we have that very, very dilute, whereas in this ink pot you can see it's much more darker, and in this ink pot it's very dark. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the mid-toned ink and simply paint over these shadow bits, the shadow areas, and because it's diluted ink you can still see all the detail underneath, exactly like a watercolour wash would be. We can have a little bit of ink on here, and that is going to show or throw a little bit of shading or a bit of shadow onto there like so. And now for this area, which does have a definite shadow, I'm not going to use the mid-toned, I'm going to go into the very weak ink and just paint in. Be brave. Paint in there. We can drop a little bit of water on just to make it a little bit lighter in places. And I'll stick all of this area also in shadow. And I'm going to be brave once again and put all of this in shadow, because because we've put the ink on here, it's not going to look right if you don't have the same wash of ink on the other parts of where the shadows are. So all of this, all of that down there. Now we're concerned about this area here because it is quite flat, and we can put a little bit more texturizing in. So I think what we could do first is just apply a little bit of more shadow, but make it a bit more patchy, because if you look at the photograph, it is slightly, obviously the surface is not smooth, it is quite rough, so you do get these little areas. So what we can do is get the ink again, put a bit of ink on, and then maybe just pull it around with some water, exactly like I've done in previous videos but with watercolor. But this is going to be with ink, so it's not going to be mixed media. If we used watercolor, it would turn into a mixed media picture, but because we're using ink, it's 100% ink, so it's still an ink drawing. So to do this, I'm going to be applying this onto dry paper, and I'm using the original very dilute ink. So all I'm going to do is apply some of this ink, just haphazardly, then into the water, drop some of the water on, and then just pull it around, or drop a bit more ink onto there. And as ever, you get a bit of rag and just dab it here and there just to make it a bit more patchy, and that's going to give the impression that we have quite an uneven surface. Leave some of the under ink wash showing through, that'll do there. Push that around with some water, and then just dab it here and there to give it that sort of patchy, dirty look. And I'll just do that on there. I'll do some on there because it is pretty much the same as this area. Right, so I've just put some watery diluted ink onto the shadow side, which is made it much nicer. It's a little bit textured, but I'm still not happy with it because it's still a little bit neat for my liking. So I'm now going to get some toilet roll, and I'm going to do a little bit of splattering. So we'll just do something like that. So splatter with some diluted ink. Now splatter again with some clean water. And that's just give it a little bit of extra texture. Now looking at the picture, all that really needs to be done is we've got this part of the road and the pavement. Now the pavement, as it's an old area, looks like it's cobbled. So we can sort of simulate some cobbles. Shouldn't be too difficult. And again, it'll give it a nice little bit of texture in the foreground. Drawing cobbles, we're not going to draw every single one, obviously. We're just going to try and simulate what we see. I'll go into the pen, 0.05, and I will just simply sort of put them in very haphazardly, like so. And I'll just continue along there, and I'll be back when it's done. So that's the cobbles drawn in, and if we zoom in you can see how they don't really look like cobbles. It's just basically scribbles. We're just simulating cobbles. So all we need to do with this is to maybe do a little bit of shading in parts of it. As we go along, just to make it look a little bit variated, and pretty much doing the same sort of thing we did with the tile and the wall here, but it's just on a much smaller scale. So looking at this, what I've decided to do to get a simple tone on is just to use the 0.05 pen and just very simply go over it like this. It's going to put a simple tone, so we're not looking at totally white paper. And then we may even put a touch of ink just here and there, drops of ink, pull it around with a bit of water just to give a little bit of texture work, just like we did with this. The easiest way to put texture in. And the road here, this is far too light, so with the road all we need to do is very simply put a tone on by simply doing lines. And then we could do a few little lines this way, crosshatch. And that's just going to smooth out a little bit these lines. And that would pretty much do for the road, as there's not much there. So now for these cobbles, I'm just taking a little bit of ink and I'm just going to sort of pull it across a little bit into the water, pull it around just to give it this sort of old dirty look. So drop a little bit of ink here. It's the same sort of thing you've seen me do in other videos with watercolour. So this is just ink. Give a bit of a dab to make it patchy if you'd want it. Okay, so we've got lots of textures in the bottom now, some nice shading. It looks old. I think there's just two things we need to do. One, we go back to we'll try the 005 pen, and we will still do a little bit of hatch work or cross hatching or hatching, depends how much detail we want, and we will just put a little bit here and there on parts of this shadow side of the building. And we also need to get some white ink and then paint in the window frames, because we haven't put those in yet. A bit more texture onto this area. All I'm going to do is leave really just here and there. Put a little bit of some lines, not a lot. Now I'm just looking at the picture where it is a little bit darker around some areas. This is where I'm just going to apply just a touch. Now we don't need to do a lot because we've put all the other texture on, so this just completes it. Right, so that's a little bits of pen work on the shadow side, and if we zoom in we can see it's not much. A few little scribbles here, some scribbles there. You're going to put a few underneath the window frame to make it look like it's maybe liquid drip down or something like that. We've got some stains and marks going from the pavement up on this part, and I've also put just a few little bits and bobs on the sunlit side. Not much, because we want that kept pristine. So the only thing to do now is to use a small brush, a little bit of ink, and paint in some of these window frames. Just like this. And that's it. That's the picture completed. We've got quite a nice little rendition of an all ink architectural street scene. We've got bags of detail and texture on the walls. We've got some nice block work. We've got some nice brickwork and tiles. It looks like what it's supposed to look like, and we've kept the background street by putting a few details in, but hardly any. We've kept them in the background. And before I go, one thing I would like to show is a couple of my previous works of the pictures I've done using this exact technique. So usually when I do the proper stuff, it takes a lot longer than what I've done here. This has been done quite quickly, so the amount of texture is not as much as what I would. But if we take our time, we can have something like this. The same sort of thing we've just done. We've got tile work, brickwork, stonework. This is the original Bakewell pudding shop, famous shop, but we've got the ink washes to make some shading, some shadows, and the cross hatching to go over it. Another one is the quite famous Tan Hill Inn, Britain's highest pub. Now we can see this is stonework, but it's the exact same method. It's just pretty much like vertical, some vertical lines, and then some stronger lines crisscrossing here and there to make the texture. And this here is just similar of how I did the cobbles in the picture we've just done. And we've got here some pronounced shadows because this is cross-hatching, also diluted ink, which really enhances it. Another one, York Minster, with some houses in the foreground. Now once again we've got blocks, not as complicated as what we've just done, but the shading is just pretty much just vertical lines, just as we did a lot of the brickwork in the other picture. And all of this is ink, dilute ink over the vertical lines. So we've got the shadow, we've enhanced the shadow, but we can still see all the texture and detail underneath. Another picture, again, lots of blocks, just lots of vertical lines in this one. Gone over a few of them a second time to darken them up. Lots of hatch work, cross hatching on the shadows, and once again lots of dilute ink. Maybe a couple of applications. We do a couple of applications of lighter, more dilute ink, than one application of thick ink, which would make it too strong. And finally, again, we've got lots of stonework, which is produced by vertical lines, and then just some dots and some dashes like I did on the blocks of the right hand house in the picture we've just done. And we can see I've just put little bits of dilute ink over to give extra texture. All of this is hatch work and a strong application of ink, dilute ink, all over this, all over here and on here. So all of these pictures, yes, much more advanced, but of course something like this might take me something like 12, 15 hours to do, whereas this picture we've just done is taken maybe 2 hours. But all of this is exactly the same technique as we've just done here, just more time taken at it. So I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration, and I do apologize for the length of it, but I did want to show in quite detail of just how I draw brickwork, stonework, tiles, all quite important things in architectural drawing, and how I render, sort of put detailing and texture by using a pen. So that's it, and I'll see you the next time I see you, which will be next week, of course. So until then, goodbye.